rain fell in sheets, a relentless gray curtain that blurred the world outside my apartment window. It was the kind of rain that felt personal, like the sky itself was mourning. I sat on the edge of my couch, a half-eaten slice of birthday cake on the coffee table, the single candle now a melted stub. 32 years old today, and the weight of that number pressed against my chest. Not because of the years, but because of the email I'd received just hours ago. Dear Elena, it began, we regret to inform you that your position at Horizon Innovations has been terminated, effective immediately. Fired on my birthday. The words stung, sharp and cold, like a slap I hadn't seen coming. Horizon wasn't just a job. It was my life for the past 8 years. I'd poured everything into it. Late nights, skip vacations, ideas that turned their struggling marketing department into a powerhouse. I'd been the one they called when campaigns faltered, the one who stayed until midnight to perfect a pitch. And now with a single email, they'd erased me. No explanation, no warning, just a severance package and a sterile best wishes. The cake tasted like ash in my mouth. I stood and wandered to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. The city blurred beyond. Chicago's skyline, all sharp edges and ambition, now felt like a stranger. I wondered what I'd done wrong. Was it the new campaign I'd proposed? Too bold, maybe? Or had I stepped on someone's toes without realizing? My boss, Richard Caldwell, had always been distant, his smiles tight, his praise rare. But I'd never thought he'd do this. Not like this. Not today. The apartment was too quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies thoughts you'd rather ignore. I thought of my mother who'd passed 3 years ago, her voice still clear in my mind. Elena, you're stronger than you know. Life will test you, but you'll always find a way. She'd said it during her final days, when cancer had stolen her strength, but not her spirit. I wish she were here now, to tell me what to do with this ache, this betrayal. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend Maya. Happy birthday, Elle. You okay? Haven't heard from you, I didn't reply. How could I explain this? I turned away from the window and caught my reflection in the mirror across the room. Dark curls framed a face that looked tired, eyes red from holding back tears. I didn't recognize myself. This wasn't the Elena who'd walked into Horizon 8 years ago, full of fire and dreams. That Elena had believed hard work would always pay off, that loyalty meant something. Now I wasn't so sure. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and I sank back onto the couch, the email still open on my laptop. I read it again, searching for clues, some hint of why. But there was nothing, just corporate jargon and a signature from HR. I thought of Richard's face, his polished suits, his way of looking through you rather than at you. He'd been the one to hire me, back when Horizon was a small startup with big dreams. I'd believed in those dreams, believed in him. And now this. A memory flickered. My first day at Horizon, when Richard had shaken my hand and said, "You're going to do great things here, Elena." I'd clung to those words through every challenge, every success. They'd fueled me. Now they felt like a lie. I closed the laptop and picked up the cake, intending to throw it out, but something stopped me. Instead, I set it back down and stared at the candle's wax, pooled like tears on the frosting. Maybe it was the rain, or the silence, or the weight of turning 32 alone, but a spark ignited deep within me. Not anger, not yet, but something fiercer, a quiet resolve. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. If Horizon didn't want me, I'd find another way. I'd build something better, something mine. The idea was vague, unformed, but it was there, pulsing like a heartbeat. I didn't know it then, but that moment, on that rainy birthday, was the beginning of everything. As I sat there, The city's lights flickered through the rain, and I felt a shift. The world hadn't ended. It had cracked open. And through that crack, I glimpsed possibility. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I wasn't going to let this define me. Not Horizon, not Richard, not this betrayal. I'd find a way to rise, to create something extraordinary. And maybe, just maybe, I'd show them what they'd lost. The weeks that followed my firing were a blur of coffee, insomnia, and a stubborn refusal to let despair win. I'd wake up each morning to the same gray Chicago skyline, the rain replaced by a biting November wind that seemed to carry my uncertainty with it. My apartment, once a cozy haven, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in with every unpaid bill that arrived. Severance pay only stretched so far, and the job market was brutal. Every application I sent out seemed to vanish into a void, and the rejections that did come were polite but impersonal. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. I started to wonder if I was invisible. But I wasn't idle. That spark from my birthday had grown into a fire, small but persistent. I'd always had a knack for storytelling, crafting campaigns that made people feel something, believe in something. At Horizon, I'd turn their vague ideas into narratives that sold millions. Why couldn't I do that for myself? The idea of starting my own business had taken root, though it was still more dream than plan. I spent hours at my kitchen table, a notebook filled with scribbled ideas, a marketing agency, but different, not cold and corporate like Horizon, but human, authentic, focused on small businesses with big stories. I called it Spark Vibe Studio, a name that felt like a promise to myself. The first struggle was money. My savings were dwindling, and starting a business wasn't cheap. I needed a website, a logo, a portfolio, things I couldn't afford without clients, and clients I couldn't get without those things. I reached out to Maya, who ran a small bakery downtown. She was my first cheerleader, always believing in me even when I doubted myself. "Elle, you're a genius at this stuff," she said over coffee one chilly afternoon. "Let me be your first client. Free marketing for cupcakes. How's that sound?" I laughed, but her offer was a lifeline. I designed a campaign for her bakery, Maya's Sweet Haven, focusing on her story. A single mom who turned her grandmother's recipes into a thriving business. The campaign was simple: social media posts, a heartfelt video, and a community event. But it worked. Her sales doubled in a month. That small victory gave me courage. I reached out to other local businesses, a bookstore, a family-owned cafe, a vintage clothing shop. I offered my services at a discount, promising results. Some said no, wary of a one-woman operation with no track record. But others took a chance, and I poured everything into their campaigns. I worked late into the night, teaching myself web design, learning the intricacies of social media algorithms, and crafting stories that made people care. Each success felt like a brick in the foundation of Spark Vibe, but the rejection stung, and the fear of failure was a constant shadow. Then came the first big hurdle: Richard Caldwell. I'd almost forgotten him, buried under my new hustle, until I saw his name in my inbox. He'd sent a message through LinkedIn, of all places. "Elena, I heard you're freelancing now. Horizon's launching a new product line. Interested in consulting?" My stomach twisted, the nerve of him reaching out after firing me without a word. I wanted to delete it, to tell him where he could shove his offer. But I needed the money, and Horizon's budget would dwarf my small clients. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a meeting. The Horizon office hadn't changed. Glass walls, sleek furniture, the hum of ambition. Richard greeted me with that same tight smile, as if nothing had happened. "Elena, you look well," he said, gesturing to a chair. I sat, feeling like a stranger in a place I'd once called home. He explained the project. A new tech gadget, high stakes, tight deadline. They needed a campaign, fast. I listened, my mind racing. This could be Spark Vibe's big break, a chance to prove myself on a larger stage. But as Richard talked, I noticed something. He wasn't asking me to rejoin Horizon. He wanted me as a contractor, a hired hand, no benefits, no security. It felt like another slap, a reminder that I was disposable to him. I took the job anyway. Not for Richard, but for me. The contract paid enough to cover my rent for 6 months, and I'd use their resources to build Spark Vibe's reputation. I worked harder than I ever had, crafting a campaign that was bold, emotional, and unforgettable. The launch was a success. Sales soared, and Horizon's stock ticked up. Richard sent a curt email. "Well done, Elena." No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done. I realized then that he'd never see me as anything more than a tool. That realization was a turning point. I didn't need Horizon's validation. I didn't need Richard's approval. Spark Vibe was mine, and it was growing. By spring, I had 5 steady clients, a basic website, and a small office space I shared with a freelance graphic designer named Leo. He was a quiet guy with a sharp eye for design, and we clicked instantly, trading ideas over cheap coffee. But the struggles weren't over. Competition was fierce, and larger agencies kept undercutting my rates. I lost a client to a bigger firm, and another couldn't afford to continue. Every step forward felt like 2 steps back. One night, exhausted and doubting myself, I found an old photo of my mother and me, taken at my college graduation. She was beaming, proud in a way that made my heart ache. "You'll always find a way," she'd said. I clung to those words, letting them anchor me. Spark Vibe wasn't just a business. It was my fight, my proof that I could rise above betrayal and build something meaningful. I didn't know it then, but the universe was about to test that resolve in ways I couldn't imagine. The summer sun baked Chicago's streets, turning the city into a shimmering mirage of ambition and sweat. Spark Vibe Studio was no longer just a dream. It was real, with a cramped office, a growing client list, and a reputation that was starting to spread. But success, I learned, came with its own set of thorns. The more I built, the more I felt the weight of expectations, mine, my clients, and those of the people who'd started to believe in me. And beneath it all, relationships that I thought were solid began to crack, revealing complexities I hadn't anticipated. Leo, my graphic designer partner, was my rock. His quiet humor and knack for turning my ideas into visual magic kept Spark Vibe's campaigns fresh and bold. We'd spend late nights in the office, brainstorming over takeout, laughing about the absurdity of client demands. But as the business grew, so did the pressure. Leo wanted to take on bigger clients, ones with deeper pockets, while I clung to our mission of helping small businesses tell their stories. "Elena, we're good enough for the big leagues," he'd say, his eyes bright with ambition. "Why limit ourselves?" I'd argue that our heart was in the underdog, the mom and pop shops that reminded me of my mother's resilience. Neither of us was wrong, but the tension simmered, unspoken but palpable. Then there was Maya. Her bakery was thriving, thanks in part to Spark Vibe's campaigns, but our friendship was straining under the weight of my new reality. I was always working, canceling plans, missing her daughter's school events. One evening she showed up at my office, arms crossed, her usual warmth replaced by frustration. "Elle, you're disappearing," she said. "I get that you're building something, but what about us? What about your life?" Her words cut deep, because she was right. I'd been so focused on proving myself that I'd neglected the people who mattered most. I promised to do better, but the demands of Spark Vibe kept pulling me away. The deepest conflict, though, came from an unexpected place: Richard Caldwell. After the Horizon contract, I thought I'd seen the last of him, but he kept reaching out, offering more projects, each one a tempting lifeline for Spark Vibe's shaky finances. I took them, telling myself it was just business, but each interaction left a bitter taste. Richard's emails were always formal, never acknowledging the past, and our meetings felt like a chess game where I was always a move behind. Then one day he called me to his office for a special project. I arrived expecting another product launch, but instead he leaned back in his chair, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't read. "Elena, you've impressed me," he said, his voice smooth. "Spark Vibe's doing well, but it's small potatoes. Come back to Horizon. Full-time, senior position, equity stake. You'd be running the show." I stared at him, my heart pounding. This was everything I'd wanted 8 years ago. A seat at the table, recognition, security. But it came from the man who discarded me without a second thought. I asked why he'd fired me in the first place. He shrugged, casual as ever. "Business, Elena. We needed to streamline. You were collateral damage, collateral damage." The words echoed, cold and final. I left his office without giving an answer, my mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to take the offer, to step back into the safety of a corporate machine. But another part, the part that had stayed up all night building Spark Vibe, that had cried on my birthday and vowed to rise, screamed that I couldn't go back. Not to him, not to Horizon. Yet the offer lingered, a shadow over every decision I made. The tension with Leo came to a head one sweltering August night. We'd landed a pitch with a mid-sized tech startup, a chance to break into a bigger market. I wanted a campaign rooted in the startup's scrappy origins, but Leo pushed for a sleek corporate approach. "This is our shot, Elena," he said, his voice tight. "If we nail this, we're not just a small-time agency anymore." We argued, our voices echoing in the empty office. I accused him of losing sight of our vision. He accused me of being stubborn, of holding us back. "Maybe you're too scared to grow," he said, and the words hit like a punch. He stormed out, leaving me alone with a half-finished pitch and a sinking feeling that I was losing more than just an argument. The next day, Maya called, her voice trembling. Her bakery was struggling with a new competitor, a chain that had opened nearby with deep pockets and flashy ads. She needed a new campaign, fast, but I was stretched thin, juggling the tech startup pitch and Richard's offer. I promised to help, but my focus was fractured. I felt like I was failing everyone, Leo, Maya, myself. The dream of Spark Vibe, once so clear, was blurring under the weight of these conflicts. I started to question whether I was cut out for this, whether I'd been naive to think I could build something lasting. One night, alone in the office, I found an old notebook from my Horizon days. Inside was a quote I jotted down from my mother. "The hardest battles are the ones that make you." I traced the words with my finger, tears welling. I didn't know how to fix things with Leo or Maya, or whether to trust Richard's offer. But I knew I couldn't give up. Not yet. Spark Vibe was my fight, my heart. And I'd face these conflicts head on, even if I didn't know how. Little did I know, the universe was about to throw a twist that would change everything. The Chicago skyline glittered under a rare September moon, its lights reflecting off the glass of my tiny office window. Spark Vibe Studio was teetering on the edge of something big. I could feel it, but the weight of my conflicts with Leo, Maya, and Richard's lingering offer pressed against me like a storm cloud. I was burning out, juggling too many clients, too many expectations, and too little time. My mother's words, "The hardest battles are the ones that make you," were taped to my monitor, but they felt distant, like a song I could barely hear. I was about to learn that life doesn't just test you, it throws you into the deep end without warning. It started with a phone call on a Thursday morning. I was in the office, bleary-eyed from another late night, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Elena Marquez? A woman's voice asked, crisp and professional. This is Samantha Reed from Pinnacle Ventures. We've been watching Spark Vibes work, and we'd like to meet. Pinnacle Ventures was a major venture capital firm known for backing startups that became household names. My heart skipped. They wanted to discuss investing in Spark Vibe. Serious money, the kind that could turn my scrappy agency into a real player. I agreed to a meeting the next day, barely sleeping that night as I polished my pitch. The meeting was surreal. Pinnacle's office was all glass and steel, a far cry from my shared space with Leo. Samantha, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, listened as I presented Spark Vibe's portfolio. Maya's Bakery, the bookstore, the cafe, all stories of small businesses brought to life. Her team nodded, asked questions, and by the end, Samantha leaned forward. Elena, we see potential here. Your focus on authentic storytelling is unique. We're prepared to offer $500,000 to scale Spark Vibe, with a condition. We want you to pivot toward larger clients, tech startups, corporations. That's where the growth is. I left the meeting dizzy, the contract in my inbox a golden ticket, and a crossroads. Scaling meant abandoning the small businesses I'd promised to champion. It meant becoming what I'd fought against, another horizon. I called Leo immediately, hoping to mend our rift and get his input. He was thrilled about the investment, but echoed Pinnacle's condition. This is it, Elena. We go big or we stay small forever. His words stung, reopening our earlier argument. I wanted to scream that Spark Vibe was about heart, not just money, but I couldn't deny the numbers. The investment would mean hiring a team, upgrading our tech, competing with the big agencies. I told him I'd think about it, but the truth was, I was torn. My dream was slipping through my fingers, reshaping into something I didn't recognize. Then came the twist that turned my world upside down. That evening I got another call, this one from an old colleague at Horizon, Jenna, who'd always been kind to me. Her voice was hushed, urgent. Elena, you need to know something. Horizon's in trouble. Richard's been hiding it, but they're hemorrhaging money. That product launch you did? It was a desperate move to keep investors happy. They're laying off half the staff next week. I froze, the phone heavy in my hand. Horizon, the company that had defined my career, that had fired me without a word, was crumbling. But Jenna wasn't done. There's more, she said. Richard's been asking about you. He's applying for jobs elsewhere, and he listed Spark Vibe as one of his targets. He wants to work for you. The words didn't register at first. Richard Caldwell, my former boss, the man who'd called me collateral damage, was applying to work at my company. It was absurd, impossible. Jenna sent me the proof, a screenshot of his LinkedIn profile, updated with a new resume. Under interested opportunities, there it was. Spark Vibe Studio, senior marketing consultant. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a twist. It was a betrayal of everything I'd built. Richard, who discarded me, now saw Spark Vibe as his lifeline. The audacity of it lit a fire in me. But beneath the anger was something colder. Fear. If Horizon was failing, would Richard's presence taint Spark Vibe? Would his reputation drag me down? I didn't tell Leo or Maya. I couldn't. Leo was already pushing for a corporate pivot, and Maya was struggling with her bakery's new competitor. Instead, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the Pinnacle contract and Richard's resume side by side. The irony was cruel. On my birthday, Richard had taken my career from me, and now, a year later, he was knocking on my door, hat in hand. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. But more than anything, I wanted to understand why. Why was he doing this? Was it desperation or something more calculated? I decided to confront him. I emailed Richard, keeping it professional. I saw you're interested in Spark Vibe. Let's meet to discuss. He replied within minutes, suggesting coffee the next morning. When I walked into the cafe, he was already there, looking smaller than I remembered, his suit slightly rumpled. Elena, he said, standing, his smile as tight as ever. You've done well for yourself. I didn't smile back. Over coffee, he laid it out. Horizon was on the brink of bankruptcy, and he was exploring options. He praised Spark Vibe, called it innovative, and said he wanted to bring his expertise to my team. But his eyes told a different story. There was no humility there, only calculation. I asked the question I'd been holding since my birthday. Why did you fire me, Richard? And why come to me now? He hesitated, then leaned back, his voice low. It wasn't personal, Elena. Horizon needed to cut costs, and you were expendable. But I see now you're not. You've built something real. I can help you take it to the next level, expendable. That word again. I stood, leaving my coffee untouched. I'll think about it, I said, but inside I was done. Richard wasn't here to help. He was here to survive. As I walked away, the city buzzing around me, I felt the ground shift. Pinnacle's offer, Leo's ambitions, Maya's struggles, and now Richard's audacity. It was too much. Spark Vibe was my heart, my fight, but it was slipping into a battle I hadn't chosen. I needed to decide, take the money and pivot, or stay true to my vision and risk losing it all. And Richard, what would I do about him? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was. I wasn't the same Elena who'd been fired a year ago. I was stronger, fiercer, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not Richard, not Pinnacle, take that from me. The air in Chicago had turned crisp, the leaves painting the streets in shades of amber and crimson. Fall was my favorite season, a reminder of change, of possibility. But as I stood at the crossroads of Spark Vibe's future, that possibility felt like a tightrope. Pinnacle's $500,000 offer loomed, promising stability but demanding I betray my mission. Leo's push for growth strained our partnership, and Maya's bakery was fighting to survive. And then there was Richard, his application to Spark Vibe, a shadow I couldn't shake. Yet amid the chaos, something inside me was rising, a clarity, a strength I hadn't known I possessed. This was my chance to take control, to shape Spark Vibe's future and my own. I started with Leo. We hadn't spoken properly since our argument, and the silence was eating at me. I asked him to meet me at our office, bringing coffee as a peace offering. When he arrived, his usual easy smile was gone, replaced by a guarded expression. "What's this about, Elena?" he asked, sitting across from me. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. Pinnacle's offer, Richard's application, my fears about losing Spark Vibe's soul. "I need you, Leo," I said. "Not just your designs, but your partnership. But we have to agree on what Spark Vibe is." He listened, his fingers tapping the table, and for the first time, I saw the weight he was carrying too. His own dreams, his own fears of failing. After a long pause, he nodded. "I got carried away with the big client thing," he admitted. "But you're right. Spark Vibe's special because it's about stories, not just money. Let's find a way to grow without losing," that we spent hours that night sketching a compromise. We'd take Pinnacle's investment, but negotiate terms to keep our focus on small businesses, using the funds to expand our reach, not change our heart. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Leo's smile returned, and with it, a piece of our partnership clicked back into place. Next was Maya. Her bakery was struggling, and I felt the guilt of neglecting her. I visited her at Sweet Haven, where the smell of fresh bread wrapped around me like a hug. She was behind the counter, her face tired but determined. "Elle, I don't know if I can keep up," she said, her voice cracking. "The chain's killing us." I promised her a new campaign, free of charge, and this time I meant it. We spent the weekend crafting a plan, a community-driven event called Bake the Block, where local families could share their own recipes alongside Maya's. It was risky, her budget was tight, but it was a chance to remind the neighborhood why Sweet Haven mattered. As we worked, I apologized for pulling away. "You're my family, Maya," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." She hugged me and I felt the warmth of forgiveness, a step toward healing our friendship. Richard was the hardest. I didn't want him anywhere near Spark Vibe, but ignoring him felt like letting him win. I decided to meet him again, this time on my terms. We sat in a quiet park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. "Richard," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not hiring you. Spark Vibe's mine, built from nothing after you threw me away. I don't trust you, and I don't need you." His face tightened, but he didn't argue. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like regret in his eyes. "You've changed, Elena," he said quietly. "I underestimated you." I walked away, feeling lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried since my birthday. Richard wasn't my problem anymore. He was just a man who'd made a mistake and was living with the consequences. With those pieces in place, I turned to Pinnacle. I met Samantha again, this time with a counteroffer, $400,000, with a clause ensuring Spark Vibe could prioritize small businesses for at least 3 years. It was a gamble. Less money, more control. But I was done compromising my vision. To my surprise, Samantha agreed, impressed by my conviction. "You're building something special, Elena," she said. "We want to be part of it." The deal wasn't signed yet, but it was close, and for the first time, I felt like Spark Vibe's future was in my hands. The emotional rise came on the night of Bake the Block. Maya's bakery was packed, the street outside alive with music, laughter, and the smell of fresh pastries. Neighbors shared stories, kids ran with cupcakes, and Maya's smile was brighter than I'd seen in months. Leo was there, snapping photos for the campaign, his enthusiasm infectious. As I watched the crowd, I thought of my mother, of her belief in me. I'd faced betrayal, doubt, and the temptation to give up, but I was still here, building something real. Spark Vibe wasn't just a business. It was proof that I could rise, that I could create something that mattered. But the journey wasn't over. The Pinnacle deal was close, but not final. Maya's bakery was fighting, but not out of danger. And while I'd sent Richard away, his presence lingered, a reminder of the world I'd left behind. I didn't know it then, but the final piece of this story was about to fall into place, bringing a resolution I'd never imagined and a chance to inspire others in ways I hadn't dreamed possible. November swept into Chicago with a chill that promised winter, but inside me there was warmth, a fire that had grown through every struggle, every choice. Spark Vibe Studio was no longer a fledgling dream. It was a beacon, small but steady, lighting a path I'd carved from the ashes of my firing. The Pinnacle deal was signed, with terms that let us stay true to our mission. Maya's bakery was thriving again, and Leo and I were stronger than ever, our partnership tempered by the battles we'd faced. But the true resolution, the moment that tied it all together, came in a way I never expected, carrying a message that reached far beyond my own story. It started with an email from Jenna, my old Horizon colleague. "Elena, you need to see this," she wrote, attaching a link to a business news article. The headline stopped my heart. Horizon Innovations files for bankruptcy. The company that had defined my career, that had discarded me, was gone. The article detailed mismanagement, failed investments, and Richard's abrupt resignation weeks earlier. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I felt a strange mix of sadness and closure. Horizon wasn't my enemy anymore. It was a chapter that had ended, pushing me to write my own. That same day, I got a call from a local community center. inspired by Bake the Block. They wanted Spark Vibe to lead a citywide campaign called Chicago Stories, celebrating small businesses and their role in the city's heart. It was pro bono, a labor of love, but it was exactly what Spark Vibe was meant for. Leo and I dove in, partnering with dozens of businesses, barber shops, taco stands, art studios, each with a story that deserved to be told. We created videos, murals, and events that turned neighborhoods into stages, showcasing the resilience and dreams of everyday people. The campaign went viral, not just in Chicago, but across the country, with media outlets calling it a love letter to the underdog. The emotional peak came at the campaign's closing event, a festival in Grant Park. Thousands gathered, their faces lit by lanterns and hope. Maya's bakery had a booth, her daughter handing out cookies with a grin. Leo was there, his camera capturing every moment, his pride in our work unspoken but clear. I stood on a small stage, microphone in hand, sharing Spark Vibe's story, not just the successes, but the failures, the doubts, the moment I'd been fired on my birthday. This city, these people, taught me that you don't need a big name or a corner office to make a difference. I said, you just need a story and the courage to tell it. The crowd cheered, and I felt my mother's presence, her words echoing, "You'll always find a way." Then came the final surprise. As the festival wound down, a familiar figure approached. Richard Caldwell. He looked older, his confidence replaced by something softer. "Elena," he said, his voice low, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong. About you. About everything. Spark Vibe. It's what Horizon should have been." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, but it was gone, replaced by something stronger. Peace. "Thank you, Richard," I said, "but I'm not that person anymore. I've built my own path." He nodded, and for the first time, I saw respect in his eyes. He walked away, and I knew I'd never see him again. Chicago Stories didn't just save Spark Vibe, it changed it. The campaign brought in new clients, not corporations, but small businesses from across the country, each with a story to tell. We hired a team, expanded our office, and stayed true to our mission. Maya's Bakery became a local institution, and she and I rebuilt our friendship, stronger for the struggles we'd shared. Leo and I dreamed bigger, but never at the cost of our heart. Spark Vibe wasn't just a business. It was a movement, proof that authenticity and courage could outshine even the biggest players. The universal inspiration came in the letters and emails that poured in after the campaign. A teacher in Ohio wrote that our work inspired her students to start a community project. A single dad in Texas said our videos gave him the courage to keep his diner open. A young woman in New York, fired like I had been, said she was starting her own business because of my story. I realized then that Spark Vibe wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough, who'd faced betrayal or doubt and kept going. It was a reminder that resilience isn't just surviving. It's creating, loving, and lifting others up. As I stood in my office one quiet evening, looking out at the city I loved, I thought of my birthday, of the rain and the pain and the spark that had started it all. I'd been fired, betrayed, but I'd found a way. Not just for me, but for Maya, for Leo, for every business we touched. My mother's words were no longer a memory. They were alive in me, in Spark Vibe, in the stories we told. I wasn't just Elena Marquez anymore. I was a storyteller, a fighter, a builder of dreams, and that was enough.